हाँ? ओम 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 सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ओम शांति शांति शांतिः। ओम सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मद् आचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ओम गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वराः गुरुर्साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः। ओम सरस्वती नमस्तुभ्यं वरदे कामरूपिणी विद्यारंभं करिष्यामि सिद्धिर्भवतु मे सदा। कार्पण्यदोषोपहतः स्वभावः पृच्छामि त्वां धर्मसम्मूढचेताः यश्रेयस्यान्निश्चितं ब्रूहि तन्मय शिष्यस्तेऽहं शाधि मां त्वां प्रपन्नम्। ओम वाङ्मे मनसि प्रतिष्ठिता मनो मे वाचि प्रतिष्ठितम् आविर्वीर्म एधि वेदस्य मा आनिष्ठः श्रुतं मे मा प्रहासिः अनेन अधीतेन अहोरात्रान् सन्ददामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मा अवतु तद्वक्तारम् अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम्। ओम शांति शांति शांतिः। ओम भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमक्षवीर्यजात्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैः स्तुष्टुवाग्वं स्वस्तनूभिः वशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इंद्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति न पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्ताक्षर्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्ददातु। ओम शांति शांति शांतिः। ओम अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिव कीर्तिं पृष्ठं गिरेरिव ऊर्ध्वो पवित्रो वाजनीव स्वमृतम् अस्मि द्रविग्नग्वं सवर्चसं सुमेधा अमृतोषितः इति त्रिशङ्कुर्वेदानुवचनम्। ओम शांति शांति शांतिः।
Very well done, Nena. Very nicely done. So, can we have a volunteer today who would like to do chanting with me for chapter 3? Anyone? Like you can follow with me. All right, so we'll do this together, okay? अथ तृतीयोऽध्यायः अर्जुन उवाच ज्यायसि चेत् कर्मणस्ते मता बुद्धिर्जनार्दन तत्किं कर्मणि घोरे मां नियोजयसि केशव व्यामिश्रेणेव वाक्येन बुद्धिं मोहयसीव मे तदेकं वद निश्चित्य येन श्रेयोऽहमाप्नुयाम्। श्रीभगवानुवाच लोके अस्मिन् द्विविधा निष्ठा पुरा प्रोक्ता मया नघ ज्ञानयोगेन सांख्यानां कर्मयोगेन योगिनां न कर्मणां नारम्भात् नैष्कर्म्यं पुरुषोऽश्नुते न च संन्यसनादेव सिद्धिं समधिगच्छति न हि कश्चित् क्षणमपि जातु तिष्ठत्य कर्मकृत्
कार्यते ह्यवशः कर्म सर्व प्रकृति जैर्गुणे कर्मेन्द्रियाणि संयम्य य आस्ते मनसा स्मरन् इन्द्रियार्थान् विमूढात्मा मिथ्याचार स उच्यते यस्त्विन्द्रियाणि मनसा नियम्यारभते अर्जुन कर्मेन्द्रिय कर्मयोगम् असक्तः स विशिष्यते नियतं कुरु कर्म त्वं कर्मज्यायो ह्यकर्मणः शरीरयात्रा पिचते न प्रसिद्ध्येद कर्मणः यज्ञार्थात् कर्मणो अन्यत्र लोकोऽयं कर्मबन्धनः तदर्थं कर्म कौन्तेय मुक्तसङ्गसमाचर सह यज्ञा प्रजा सृष्ट्वा पुरोवाच प्रजापतिः अनेन प्रसविष्वध्वम् एषो अस्विष्ट कामधुक् देवान् भावयतानेन ते देवा भावयन्तु वः परस्परं भावयन्तः श्रेय परमवाप्स्यथ इष्टान् भोगान् हि वो देवा दास्यन्ते यज्ञभाविताः तैर्दत्तान् प्रदायेभ्यो यो भुङ्क्ते तेन एव सः यज्ञशिष्टशनाः सन्तः मुच्यन्ते सर्वकिल्बिषै भुञ्जते ते त्वघं पापा ये पचन्त्यात्मकारणात् अन्नाद् भवन्ति भूतानि पर्जन्यादन्न सम्भवः यज्ञाद् भवति पर्जन्यः यज्ञ कर्म समुद्भवः कर्म ब्रह्मोद्भवं विद्धि ब्रह्माक्षर समुद्भवं तस्मात् सर्वगतं ब्रह्म नित्यं यज्ञे प्रतिष्ठितम् एवं प्रवृत्तितं चक्रं नानुवर्तयति यः अघायुरिन्द्रिया रामः मोघं पार्थ स जीवति यस्त्वात्मरतिरेव स्यात् आत्मतृप्तश्च मानवः आत्मन्येव च सन्तुष्टः तस्य कार्यं न विद्यते नैव तस्य कृतेनार्थः न कृतेनेह कश्चन न चास्य सर्वभूतेषु कश्चिदर्थव्यपाश्रयः तस्मात् सक्तः सततं कार्यं कर्म समाचर असक्तो ह्यचरन् कर्म परमाप्नोति पुरुषः कर्मण्येभिसंसिद्धिम् अस्थिता जनकादयः लोकसङ्ग्रहमेवापि सम्पश्यन् कर्तुमर्हसि यद्यदाचरति श्रेष्ठः तत्तदेवेतरो जनः स यत्प्रमाणं कुरुते लोकस्तदनुवर्तते न मे पार्थस्ति कर्तव्यं त्रिषु लोकेषु किंचन नानवाप्तम् अवाप्तव्यं वर्त एव च कर्मणि यदि ह्ययं न वर्तेयं जातु कर्मण्यतीन्द्रितः मम वर्तमानो वर्तन्ते मनुष्याः पार्थ सर्वशः. The last one. उत्सीदेयुर्मे लोका न कुर्यां कर्म चेदहं शङ्करस्य च कर्ता स्याम् उपहन्यामिम प्रजाः. That's the last one for this week. Narayan everyone. Wish you all a very happy Diwali. Hope you all had an awesome celebration. So we'll start with chapter 5 in today's class. I think we can just get started with it very quickly. But basically, we are going to try and understand the difference and the similarities between Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga. And we will understand how similar they are, but how different in terms of their approach. And we will also try and understand what does true renunciation really mean. And that is why the name of the chapter is the Yoga of True Renunciation. Typically, when we think of renunciation, we always think of the sannyasis who leave everything in the world and they go off in the jungles or in the mountains and they live in caves and they are like, they've got nothing to do with the general, world, the way we deal with it. And in this chapter, Bhagwanji is going to make it very clear to us what does this really mean? That is not true renunciation. That is also renunciation, but there is another way to look at it. And what he calls true renunciation will involve us being in this world and yet being able to get away from it, being able to be a true renouncer in that sense. So what does it mean on a day-to-day basis is what we will learn here. It's building upon everything we have learned about Karma Yoga and Sankhya Yoga over the last 4 chapters.
So to add a little bit more color is every chapter, except for the first chapter, typically starts with Arjun asking a question. And that leads to the discourse of greater depth of that particular concept. And like we've talked about, the Gita is divided in 3 sections. So you have Karma Yogi, you have Bhakti Yogi, and you have Jnana Yogi. Jnana Yoga, sorry. So now we're at the second last chapter of Karma Yoga, right? So we're going deeper into understanding Karma Yoga and who we are and how we have to be. Now, let's frame these 5 chapters, right? What did the first chapter start with? Confusion. He was fully in action, fully in body consciousness, fully operating from ego, operating from likes and dislikes. When he moved the chariot in front of his family members, he said, "Boss, I can't kill them." And he had his own lofty reasons and justifications and why he shouldn't do it and why he's a better person for not doing it. And then in chapter 2, what happens? Chapter 1, Bhagwanji is silent. But the confusion and dilemma forces a person to reach out for help, right? Because you now realize you cannot do it by yourself. He had Bhagwanji next to him on his chariot. So he reached out to Bhagwanji for help. Now, when we first reached out to Bhagwanji in help in 2.7, he surrenders himself to Bhagwanji. And what does the first part, what does he talk about? He talks about Tattva Gyan. He reminds Arjun, your sword can slay the body, but it will never slay them. Because they are not the body, they are the soul. So they are immortal and they're not changeable. So he started chapter 2 trying to remind Arjun that you and everybody you know are a soul, not a body. Don't be attached at that body relationship. So you cannot do them any harm. And what does chapter 3 then evolve? He says, you are a karma yogi. You need to focus on doing your action. And he talks a lot about how you define your own duty and action based on your desh, kal, paristiti, or so in chapter 3 he talks about karma yogi, right? But then he also ends chapter 3 saying, as long as you have a body, you have to be in action. And as long as you have action, you will have bondage. So then he talks in chapter 4 that the only way to do action without bondage is by offering the fruits of your action to God. To do yagya bhav. That's the entire concept. Do the duty that you are to do, but do it with a sense of serving Bhagwanji and don't get attached to the results of that action. Right? So he talks about that in chapter 4. And in chapter 4, he also, and chapter 3, he talks a little bit about Sankhya Yoga and the difference between Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga, the different paths, right? We talked a lot about that in chapter 4, especially towards the end, where he builds on the characteristics of Sankhya Yoga, how they see, how they operate from the world, etc. So chapter 5 naturally asks the question, the very first shloka, which we'll get into, is why can't I be a Sankhya Yoga? Why do I have to be a Karma Yoga, right? So this is the part where Bhagwan Ji will go deeper into explaining the difference between what a Sankhya Yoga is, what a Karma Yoga is, what does renunciation mean, and which is the better one for all of us. That makes sense?
I think it would be good for us to remind ourselves for a beautiful question that Bhagyashree had asked in the last class towards the end. She asked, like, why are we even looking for exit or like mukti from this world, right? Why is it so wrong or bad to keep having lives? Like, you know, there is beauty in this life. So why would I want to get out of this whole cycle of birth and death in the first place? So just to remind ourselves, we're not looking for an exit from being born. You know, that is not the purpose. The purpose is to have the choice in the matter. Right now, we have no choice, right? And that we don't have a freedom to choose how I should be born, what I should be doing when I'm born, in what form do I want to be born. We have no such freedom. Based on our past actions, we are bonded by the law that this is what will happen in your next life. This is who you will be born as. This is what you need to work through. There is a bondage. And I was reading this somewhere where it said that if you have to do the same thing, but if it is forced upon you, then it becomes very difficult to do. It becomes very painful activity. But the same thing when you do with your own ichha, with your own will, you want to do it, then the same thing becomes very easy to do. You actually enjoy it, right? And why does that happen? Because we all, in our true nature, is to be free. That is why freedom is such an important, that emancipation, freedom is such an important universal right. It is enshrined in every constitution in the world, irrespective of which race, which country, where you're coming from, right? And it's been so throughout the ages. That's because our innate nature, God's innate nature, is to be free. And we are trying to go back to that form. We are trying to get ourselves out of the bondage of being born. And after that, we want to be born again as out of our free will, to be able to continue to do seva. So the ultimate goal, the ultimate devotee is not one who says, give me mukti, give me moksha, and after that, give me that nirvana, and after that, I never want to be born again. No, 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 no. The highest devotee is the one who, after having realized his, that moksha, he says, now tell me, how should I come back again? I want to come back again so that I can continue to do your seva, so that I can continue to be in this world of yours and be able to enjoy it, be able to do everything that I need to help this world and people around. But then they come off their own free will, right? So that's what we are seeking. We're not seeking that I don't want to ever come back in this world, but come back in this world of our own will. That is very important to understand. So the renunciation here that we are going to talk about, the reason for that renunciation is, again, like that difference. What is true renunciation? We're not renouncing the world. Nobody said this world is Bhagwanji's, right? The Maya is Bhagwanji's. It's about renouncing our attachment and how to get free of that glamour, that hold that it has, right, on us, so that we don't become its slave. We become its master, which is our true destiny. We have to become the master of our body. We have to become the master of our senses, master of our mind, and not their slave. And when we act as a master, then the same Maya becomes a Yog Maya. And when we become its slave, then it becomes a Maya Jal. So that is what we are trying to renounce, and that's the aim. So we'll start chapter 5. Om Shri Paramatmane Namaha. Ath Panchamo Adhyayaha.
Ashwin, would you like to read? Since you're coming back after a while.
Yeah, will do. Introduction. In this chapter, the two parts of discipline of the Sankhya, direct perception, and that of the yoga, action, have been discussed. It would now be established that the two parts, though entirely different from each other, lead to the same point, self-realization. It is clearly shown in this chapter that an aspirant established firmly in the Sankhya discipline has an unshakable conviction that the diverse names and forms of the phenomenal world are manifestations of one reality. As such, there is no trace of the feeling of being a doer of actions in a Sankhya yogi, in spite of performing beneficial actions involuntarily. This is because of non-attachment of a superlative degree and complete absence of ego. Thus, even though actions may appear as being done by a Sankhya yogi, such a man holds the conviction that he is not the doer of those actions, but the actions are being done by the three gunas of primal nature through his body. On the other hand, a Karma yogi, established firmly in the yoga discipline, performs all the actions with the conviction of the actions being done as an instrument in the hands of God. In a way, both disciplines require the renunciation of arrogance and ego in actions. This is why this chapter is named the Yoga of True Renunciation.
So, these two parts we will talk about a lot, and I'm sure all of you will have to do a lot more manan to really understand the difference. But visualize it in a few ways. So one is, there is something, if you have to scale a mountain, you can either scale it by going slowly right around the mountain. It's the longer route, but every step you take, you're going further up. Versus scaling it vertically, you may think the route is shorter to the peak of the mountain, but one small slip and you can fall down and quite right back to the bottom. Now, in this analogy of the mountain, the peak of the mountain is self-realization. So the goal is exactly the same, right? The bottom of the mountain is essentially the animal form that Bhagwanji manifests himself in, right? And we have gone through many, many lives of that animal form before we've been given this opportunity of coming into human form, right? So now, yeah, so that's the analogy. Now coming to Sankhya yogi and Karma yogi.
To just complete that analogy, right? So Sankhya yogi is this rock climber who's climbing up vertically, right? So as you can imagine, a person who's climbing up this mountain vertically, his skill level has to be of a considerably different level compared to a person who will go via the paved road slowly around the mountain, right? Completely different levels of skill set that is required. That's one. And secondly, the process is going to be very different. The equipments a rock climber will use will be different compared to a tourist who's walking up the road, right? So time taken is different, of course, but equipments are different. Your skill levels are different. The process by which you will do this will be different. And the practice that you need to do on a daily basis to continue on two different paths is very, very different. But the end goal is the same. End goal is exactly the same. You reach the same point either way. So the rock climber is the Sankhya yogi, and the path of the scenic route of walking up a easy paved path with like good pit stops along the way to enjoy your journey is the Karma yogi's path. One more question that keeps coming up and often causes confusion is the fact that people think they have a choice in the matter.
So let me elaborate a little bit before we get to that part. Okay. So so far clear? Any questions so far? So in the previous chapter, Kavita, please.
Tuhina, you were mentioning about this, people with the free will, they come back, right? Like they attain certain stage of the self-realization. So are they Sankhya yogi?
Whenever people come back with their free will,
then they are born as Sankhya Yogis, absolutely, because they are already one with God and they
Oh.
come back in this world to serve the world.
So this part, let me explain, right? I was just getting to it. So in the previous shloka, Bhagwan Ji has mentioned that whenever people are moving away from the righteous path, I manifest myself in human form to bring people back to alignment, right? Now, when he's saying I manifest himself, he's not coming in his Virat Roop, which is a very scary roop. We will read about that in chapter 11, I think. He comes back in a body form. So a Sankhya Yoga essentially manifests in a body. And because he doesn't identify himself with the body, he identifies himself only with Bhagwan Ji, he's able to maintain that purity of energy. But here's the trick. Every Sankhya Yogi has to go through the natural process of detaching themselves from the body and the mind. Because they go into the body, they are a baby, they need to be fed, they get attached to the ego, the mind, the senses, all of that is functioning.
Even if it's
All of that is functioning, which is why these Sankhya Yogis at some age, 8, 10, 11, 15, 25, whatever it is, you will read that they leave their families. They go into deep penance, where they renounce themselves of any attachment to family members, to work, to everything else. They reach that pure space, that purity all over again before they come back into the world. And that is the bondage of this planet, or this Maya that we have. That even if a Sankhya Yogi is born and he knows, like a Sankhya Yogi, from the moment they're born, they know they're Sankhya Yogi. But for them to reach that state, they have to go through that penance, just like all of us. We all are born knowing we're not Sankhya Yogi. Let's be really clear, right? But what do we all know for sure? We all know we have to do duty. We all know we have work to do. We all know we have to take care of our parents. We all know we are born to having to take care of our own body, our lifestyle, our livelihood, our children, our family. We are born with that sense of needing to act. And that's the difference. That's the subtle difference between a Karma Yogi and a Sankhya Yogi. So our path is that of act and continue acting, because that's what we are born to do. But do that action in a way that does not create bondage. And when we do it in that right manner, we are also scaling up the mountain. We don't have to go the Sankhya Yogi route at all. We have to attach ourselves to Bhagwan Ji through our action. And the reason why this is the scenic route. Okay, so any questions up to now before I explain the third part?
Abhinav, again, see, the self-realized souls come back again as a Sankhya Yogis, right? So then again, they are going back to get to the self-realization.
Yes.
So I would visualize it like this, right? If you enter, and this is something that I think Kabir had said, if you enter a Kalkotri, you cannot escape it without a Kalik on you.
Explain
right?
in English.
So if you enter a Kalkotri, like a place which is not a brothel, Kalkotri is which has a lot of soot in there, okay? Because there's a lot of soot, black soot everywhere. So if you come out of that, there is no way you come out of it without having some soot on you somewhere, okay? So the world is like that. When the whole process of acquiring duality to come into this world will create a certain amount of bondage. There is no escaping that. And this is a very important thing for us to know, that if a Sankhya Yogi needs to go through cleansing and penance before he can make himself available as Bhagwanji's instrument all over again, then imagine the amount of hard work we have to do.
Okay, so these guys, when Sankhya Yogis come in at various stages of their life, there are some who are like, at 3 or 4, that they are Sankhya Yogis. They are talking at that level when they're 3 or 4. But still, by the time they make themselves fully available, it can be like at various stages, right? Depending on the soul that comes in at 4, 5, 8, 10, 16, But the point is that even they have to go through this cleansing process. So when I read Bhagavatam, there are so many stories there where, there was an avatar of Bhagwanji, and there have been several avatars of Bhagwanji, incarnations of Bhagwanji. They come in the human form to show the world how to be, and then they take up certain positions in society, like as a king or as some other form, and taking up various roles of people. They go through the entire life as perfect examples of who you should be. But even them, at the end of, like, after having done their duty for why they came into this world, they then again go back to cleanse themselves. It's like, okay, I went into the forest to do Bhagwanji's work, but by the time I've completed my work with full duty, my body will be covered with sweat, it is dirty, I need to come back and take a bath to purify myself all over again. It is that process. So the fact of being born itself creates just that the world is imperfect. Everything that we do will have its imperfections. In fact, if you notice, if you start understanding the way of pujas are done, the vidhis, the processes, one of the last things in every puja is to ask for forgiveness, because it is a guarantee. It's a guarantee that whatever we do will be marred by imperfections that are unintended, and because there are unintended imperfections, you just ask for forgiveness for all of those, and you will incur no sin for that, because Bhagwanji says that is a guarantee, because you're born in this world.
And
Okay.
also you have to, so to add on to your question as well, all of us, when we are born in bodily form, we come out as babies. And a baby, for the first 12 months, they don't have an intellect. They only have their senses activated. So, of course, a powerful soul will grow out of that entire attachment, but you have to grow out of it. Similarly, all of us, even a Sankhya Yoga, for first 2-3 years, they will be operating out of their senses. I like, dislike, I'll cry if I don't get it, otherwise my survival is at risk. That's how it's designed in the planet. That's how we've designed as animals, right? So that's why they have to go through that journey as well. But like when I mentioned, some may be fast, some may be slow, but they all know that this is not the real. At some point, they have to detach. And they all know that very, very early on.
Yeah, it's like, when you enter a game, if you're entering, say, a reality show or a game, you know that, there are rules of that game. You have to adhere to the rules of the game to get in. And that, whatever dress you have to wear, whatever role you have to assume, you have to do those things. And then the whole process of cleansing yourself, getting out of it, and then making yourself available. And even after the end of the process, all of them will go through their own process of cleansing themselves to say, okay, now I've done my duty. Let me cleanse myself and go back to Godhead. At least that's what I have read in every story in Bhagavatam. Yes, go. Yes, Kapul.
Very nice. Thank you.
I wanted to know if anywhere in the Bhagavad Gita or anywhere Bhagwanji has actually mentioned that this is a transient world and actually the real world is beyond this life. And that is why you need to ensure that finally you merge with the light. So is that anywhere mentioned did Bhagwanji say that to Krishna, that this is all Maya and this is not, you're just transiting through this and this is not the real thing, what you're seeing?
So it starts with chapter 2. Yeah. So when in chapter 2, after 2.10, I think, is when Bhagwanji starts speaking, and he starts straight with Tattva Gyan, like the purest form of knowledge. And out there, he repeatedly explains that we are not this body. Everything you interact with is temporary. And if everything is temporary, that means it will come and it will go. It has a start date and it has an end date. But for the temporary to exist, there has to be something permanent behind. And that permanence is his, it's his energy. It's what we call universal consciousness. It's what we call soul. In the Gita, he describes it as soul. So just like we change clothes every day, and clothes are temporary, we change bodies over lifetimes and lifetimes and lifetimes. That doesn't make clothes real.
That's exactly how Gita starts. This is the first thing he says in Gita. So Gita instruction starts from Shlok 2.11. And the first thing he says is that you are grieving for those for whom no grief is called for. That's the first thing he tells Arjun. And he says that the wise grieve neither for the living nor the dead. And then he goes on to see the very next shloka in the 12th shloka, he gives the answer to the question that you asked. He says, there was never a time when I was not. There was never a time when you were not. And there will never be a time when we shall cease to be, both of us.
So 2.12. So
yeah. And then in 2.13, he gives this analogy that Abhinav just mentioned, that your body is like clothes. The way you change, the body changes clothes. Similarly, the soul changes bodies. And then he says, in a later this thing, he says that this is all unreal. In Shloka 15 and 16, in Shloka 16 specifically, he always says that the real, what is real and what is unreal? The definition is, real is that which always is. It always is. If something ceases to be at one point of time, then it is not real. It is defined as unreal. So that's where his definition comes in. It isn't as if like I can see this and so it's real, and I can't see it so it's not real. No. If I can, so then we came up with the understanding what is the difference between the Satya and Rit. Satya is that which is true for the time being. It is morning or it is afternoon in Singapore is true, is the Satya for Singapore. But in US, it is night. So it is not Satya in Singapore, right? Now, Rit is that which always shall be. Bhagwanji is a Rit. Okay. So Rit is what is real.
Yeah.
Everything else is unreal, including the fact that there is day or night. That is Satya. It's momentary thing that we experience. It's Satya. It is Satya for me in this context. It's contextual. Satya is contextual. Rit has no context. In every context, it is true.
But then, I mean, just getting back to what Bhagyashree asked that day, then our endeavor should be to be with the real finally. So that is the reason we need to, we have to make the endeavor to be on the right path so that finally we merge and we do not again and again come back to a body form, right? That is the reason we are doing this.
The reason we are doing this is to recognize our true self. And the whole idea of us going back to him, it isn't as if like there is a travel. There is no distance to be traveled. It isn't as if like we are here now in this world and from here we will go to another world which is inhabited by Bhagwanji. That there is visualization, yes. There is this whole concept of 5 layers of world above, like, you know, then there are layers of Netherland and everything, and then there is Vaikuntha on top where Bhagwanji sits, right? This is for us to understand. It's visually easy to understand it that way. But in reality, there is no distance to be traveled. The day you wake up to that truth, you are in touch with Bhagwanji. You have reached Bhagwanji. And that Bhagwanji stays inside of us. He doesn't stay. Vaikuntha is inside of us. These layers, these 7 different layers are basically levels of consciousness inside of us. So when we go from one level of consciousness to another level of consciousness, we have moved from this world to the next, to the next, to the next, until we reach Vaikuntha. But all of that is here and now. Right? So we are doing all of this to be in touch with Bhagwanji. And the moment we are, then what happens? Why are we trying to go back to that Godhead? Why are we trying to go back to home? We are trying to go back to home because everything we are doing is to be happy, to go back to our Swabhav.
So
then it doesn't matter what is happening outside of us or what we are doing, in what situation we are. we will be in a state of bliss. In a state of bliss, whatever we do, however we do, will always be an efficient action, which will only create bounties for this world.
So let me analogy, right? Just like moths are constantly attracted to light, and they go closer and closer to a light emitting object till they get burnt and they get jalofied or they die or whatever, right? Similarly, our human nature, every single human being wants happiness, and they want everlasting happiness. No one will say, no, I only want to be happy on weekends. Weekdays is okay. No, everybody wants purpose. Purpose of our life is to achieve happiness. The entire journey starts because we tend to attach happiness to temporary objects. And the journey that we are going through is body consciousness to soul consciousness, because soul consciousness, innate nature is bliss, and that is heaven. So if you can live in this world, interact with everybody, but be in a constant state of bliss, that is our eventual purpose. That makes sense?
Yeah, in practical way, that is what it really means.
So the third part between Sankhya Yogi and Karma Yogi, and I just wanted to complete it, the entire analogy, is Sankhya Yogi, when they climb up on that mountain, if they make a mistake, they slip right to the bottom of the mountain. Bottom of the mountain is what? Animal form, right? And
Yeah.
this,
So an example would be the Sankhya Yogi. I had given this example in Bhagavatam. I had read a story where Bharat, right? Raja Bharat, he was a Sankhya Yogi, born as a king, completed his entire life journey, did everything he needed to, and then went into forest to renounce and to cleanse himself, to go back to Godhead. And what happened? He made that mistake of getting attached to a little deer, baby deer. And that's it. He fell down so much that he was born as an animal all over again. So he was born as a deer in his next life, right? So the fall is tremendous
yeah, so
for a small mistake.
yeah, so, and this we can also see in real life, where we go to Banaras and we go to all these saints, and we see they're so quick to anger, they're doing charas, they feel as if they've renounced the world by not doing anything. But their mind is not stationed in God's lap. That's the big difference. For a Sankhya Yogi to operate in this world and he has to be one with Bhagwanji at all times. That's when his energy and Bhagwan's energy is one and the same. Because at no point is he associating himself with the body, with his mind, with his ego, none of that. Right? He's fully situated in Satagun, which is being completely one with Bhagwanji. A lot of saints that we'll see claim to have renounced a lot of the world, but you will see they're actually a lot closer to Tamagun, an animal form, where they're doing charas, they're easy to anger, they have all these other traits, right? The slippery slope is this, that in next life, chances are they would probably lose this opportunity to come to human form. For us as karma yogis, which is why it's the safer path, even if we don't practice, like a lot of people don't have the Gita books, they're not reading it, right? But if you're not practicing Yagya Bhav, your mind is still fully focused on action. So you don't slip that much. You don't slip the entire mountain, because your mind is still in dynamism, creating value, creating self-worth, ensuring people are happy, doing your duty, serving your parents. All of these things are still ingrained in us. So our slip on the mountain is a lot slower. And that's what it means in practical sense, right? And I think we've covered this now. And I'm sorry if we went into way too much detail here, but the start of this chapter actually talks a lot about that.
I think this is important because sometimes, that this differentiation can create a lot of confusion in people's minds. So it's very, very important. And I think
So what I understand from this is basically, especially when you're talking about sannyasis and all, they renounce their responsibilities and they actually are kind of, अपनी इच्छाओं के ऊपर, मतलब is the other way around, rather than a Karam yogi is the one who actually is taking care of his responsibility, but मन से परमात्मा से जुड़ा है, and they are the ones who are actually renouncing what they should be doing. मतलब जो नहीं छोड़ना वो छोड़ देते हैं, और जो छोड़ना है उसको पकड़ के बैठ जाते हैं. Is it something what we say? Is it the right understanding what I get?
Correct. And
Yeah,
then
because now when you see, because eventually in the real sense तो वो छोड़ के बैठ गए अपनी whatever, but what गलत चीजों को पकड़ के बैठ गए, right? That's what they are doing. So, and but then isn't that causing a lot of karmas to the people around them? मतलब जो उनको जिम्मेदारियां उनको करनी है उसको छोड़ दिया. So उनकी, I mean, even the people around them are sufferers, right?
they are, but then it is their prarabdha through which they will be able to cleanse themselves, the people around them. Right? The
Sorry,
situation,
come again.
the people around them who are
Hmm.
had to go through some sort of suffering because this person has abandoned his duty.
Hmm.
Those people have an opportunity to actually cleanse their prarabdha even faster. Right?
How?
Because if, see, what is a tap? Tap is a way, austerity is a way for us to cleanse our prarabdha, right? End of the day.
Hmm.
So if I have to do, or Abhinav, for example, if I give up my duty and Abhinav now has to do double the duty of himself and all of my duties as well, then I'm not doing bad karma for myself, but he process has got an opportunity to cleanse his prarabdha faster.
As long as I'm not
Yeah.
thinking, "Arey, she's not doing her duty." kaise
It
ye,
depends
ye,
on
wo."
his attitude. If he takes it properly and he says, okay, Bhagwanji, thank you. Whatever has happened is your will. And I will use this opportunity to do even more seva, whether it is of seva, whatever way he is doing it, then cleansing his prarabdha even faster. But if he gets steeped in it and he starts to blame me for the fact that I am, responsible for his suffering, then he's on prarabdha on top of that. Right? He will, of course, the fact that he is doing drudgery to close up everything that I left on him, he's cleansing his past prarabdha. But at the same time, because of his current mindset, he's creating future bondages, clearing the old bondages, but at the same time, creating new bondages for future.
So this is either he sees as a challenge or an opportunity, is his own way of looking at the things.
Correct. And that's what we need to change. Whatever happens to us, irrespective, we are not to blame others. Whatever is coming to us, that person has only become a server of the food we have cooked for ourselves.
Yeah.
And another thing to always look at is that when other person's duty is not my prerogative, I also have to be grateful if someone else is doing his duty towards me, or making me comfortable because he's doing it as his duty. But just because it is his duty, it is not my place to get them to do something. It is my prerogative. It is not my prerogative.
My prerogative.
Grateful for that.
Now, there's also a learning point when you see like these so-called sannyasis, we actually have to have no thought in the mind, whether ye acha hai ye bura hai, wo bhi is not a job to, look at it, right? Otherwise, we end up saying, dekho ye kar rahe hain, for example. So that's also creating, because we don't know why, what has happened. It's all God's plan.
Okay. So we don't need to judge others, but we definitely need to make smart decisions about our own lives. We need to make a smart decision about, for example, guru, right? It is written in our shastras that when you are taking on a guru, then you should always be very careful. You don't just go and say, I want this person is my guru. No, you should be evaluating them. While a person may be extremely learned and may actually be a saintly person, but every saintly person will not be the right guru for us also. Right? So that is also important. Depending on what my life journey is and what tools I need to get there, there may be somebody who's the right guru for me. Right? So definitely no judgments. But we should be aware that, when we see, just because, so in Bhagavatam also there is an entire chapter which talks about how these dhongi sannyasis came around. And it is very clearly mentioned in that story that just because a person has donned monk's robes or orange robes does not make them closer to God. And they are only going to, and it is written that these new sects that are coming up, these type of people who are coming up, and there's a reason why it happened. So they talk about this reason of how it happened. Indraji did something. So these are all allegorical tales, right? And this something happened, and then he created these different types of people. Then Bhagwanji says that in future, these guys will create confusion in the minds of people. They will create confusion about what is right and what is wrong. And they will take on a garb of religion and try to show to others that they are religious, but they are not. So God disowns them. That just because you're doing certain types of rituals or wearing certain types of clothes does not make you, he completely renounces them. And then he talks about who you should be, what is the right thing to do. It's written in Bhagavatam. Like, I was actually quite surprised when I read that story. I was like, oh wow, like very clearly written.
Thank you, Abhinav. Thank you, Selena. Thank you so much.
Topics very, very quickly in the last 50 minutes.
Can I say one more thing? Because this is another piece that creates confusion, right? People come up with this idea that, a lot of people have a bit of confusion on this topic, and there is this feeling like I can choose to be this. So there is this like, I have a choice in this matter. I want to be a Sankhya yogi now. I want to, because I feel it like that. I want to give up my responsibility. I have no attachment or whatever, right? Like, I want to give up all of this up. The way I understand it, and I could be wrong, right? But my understanding over last 4 years that I've been reading this, you don't have a choice in the matter. Your circumstances, your way of being, where you are born, how you are born, all of this will prescribe a path for you. As a Sankhya yogi, you will know that you are a Sankhya yogi, and you don't have to make that determination. It becomes extraordinarily clear very early on. There are no doubts in your mind if you are a Sankhya yogi. You are born at a completely different level of self-realization. Yeah. And for all the rest of us, we are Karma yogi. And there's no point in even deluding ourselves that we can get to, like, there is no concept like, oh, there's a faster path to success here. We're not meant for that path. We are not. Let's be very, very clear about that. That's very important to know. We don't have a choice about it. This is our path, and this is the right path for us. Sankhya yogi does not need Gita. A Karma yogi needs the Gita in his hands to guide him. And that is why an Arjun is a Karma yogi at every step of the way. And this is not the first time in this, the Shloka 1 in chapter 5 that he's asking. It's not the first time he's asking this question. In chapter 3, the first question he asks is exactly this. Like, you have been extolling the virtues of Sankhya yogi and Karma yogi, and you've been saying that Gyan yoga is better than Karma yoga. You've been saying Gyan is better than Karma because subtle is smarter and better than gross. Then why are you pushing me into this, ghor activity of war? Why are you pushing me there? Let me be a Sankhya yogi. I am happy to be a beggar. He said this, no? I'm happy to be a beggar. It is better to live on alms than have the riches of the world by defeating my family members. So let me be a sannyasi. I'm willing to be a beggar. Right? High sounding principles, he said. And Bhagwanji said that these words from your mouth are that of a coward. You're being a coward. You're running away from your responsibilities. So stop being a coward. Get up and do yudh. That was what Bhagwanji said. And this is him telling us, make no mistake. If you try and run away from your responsibilities, you're not being a Karma yogi. You're deviating from your path. It is someone else's duty to be a Sankhya yogi. He has also told us that it is better to die in the line of your own duty than to try doing someone else's duties. Doing someone else's duty is very bhayava, very, very scary. So every step of the way, he's told us, do your own duty, which will come to you in the form of your life circumstances, the family you're born in, the country you're born in, the circumstances that are put up for you. They will give you your duties that you need to perform. And they are the fastest, the best, and the safest way for us to realize ourselves. Yeah.
Any questions? Anybody? Oh, Hanji.
I just want to know if you're born a Sankhya yogi and you know all along, but they still go on with life, like they get married, have children, and why do they do that if they know from start that they're going to renounce it and
That is
go?
also a part of their life story. So I just recently read, I've been reading a lot about Om Swami and various books that he's written. So in his example, he knew that he's a Sankhya yogi, but in his own journey, he knew that for him to truly renounce the world, he needs to truly
Attain.
accept the world completely, and then attain all the riches that need to be there, bind himself up, and then be able to release himself out of it. He said, I will not, what, it's like, there is this poem by Ramdhari Singh Dinkar where he says, क्षमा शोभती उस भुजंग को जिसके पास करल हो, उसको क्या जो दंतहीन विषहीन विनीत सरल हो. So a person can forgive only if he's in a state of power. If you are in a space of power and then you forgive someone because you have the ability to harm that person, but you made the choice of not harming that person, that is the real forgiveness. If you had nothing to do, like a snake that has no teeth, no poison, nothing, then what is forgiveness from him? Okay. In that respect, Om Swami decided very clearly, I will become a millionaire, I will do everything that is required, I will create a company, I will show that I can do all of these things, I will buy a Ferrari, I will do whatever is required, okay, and make sure that I do not get attached to it. And he said, at 30, I will renounce all of this up. And he did exactly that. He did that, he attained everything, and he went up the curve, he went down the curve completely, like he went to this point of like being zero, losing everything, then he went up the curve again, that no, it wasn't a fake, I can do it again. And all along knowing that everything that is happening is because of grace of God. It is not my intelligence, it is God's grace that is causing me to learn up so much. It is God's grace that is attaining me these clients. It is God's grace that is getting me this money. And at the same time, knowing at 30, now that I've got all of this, now I have to renounce, I'll renounce. And it has to be true renunciation. I cannot give it away to my family. If I give it to my family, then it's not true renouncing. I'm just giving it to who I am attached to. I have to give it to somebody who I've like just met. And he knew in an instant, this is the right person to give it to. He will utilize the resources correctly. And he had nothing to do with him. We just told him in this first meeting, we will do this thing together. At the end of this time, I will give everything up to you and I'll move away. So that's a Sankhya yogi. From day one, he knew it, but he went through it till the age of 30 before he finally left everything and went on his sadhana. And it took him another year to reach that point of full self-realization.
More, 2.5 years.
Okay. Does that help? Yeah.
All right, let's read the first.
Okay.
The
So
connection.
Yeah, Ramya will read.
From what the Lord said in the foregoing chapters, Arjuna decided to find out which part would prove beneficial to him, and so he asked.
Arjuna Uvacha Sanyasam Karmanam Krishna
Sanyasam Karmanam Krishna
Naryogam Cha Shansasi
Punaryogam Cha Chamshasi
Yachreya Etayorekam
Yachreya Etayorekam
Tanme Bruhi Sunishchitam.
Tanme Bruhi Sunishchitam.
Sannyasam is renunciation of. Karmanam, karmoka, of actions. So renunciation of actions. Krishna. Punar is then again. Yogam, whenever we use the word yog without anything else before that, in Gita, it means karma yoga. It refers to karma yoga. So yog or karma yoga are the same thing. Cha and shansasi, prashansa, extol the virtues of. Yachreya, good or beneficial. Etyo is out of these two. Ekam, etyo, ekam is that one. Tat me, tanme is tat me, tat that Me is me. Bruhi, tell. Sunishchitam, definitively.
Arjuna asked, "O Krishna, you extol renunciation of actions and you also commend desireless performance of actions. Tell me definitely, which is the better of the two for my good? Renunciation of actions versus desireless performance of actions. The process of self-realization can be divided into two categories on the basis of respective convictions underlining the two disciplines. One is the discipline of Sankhya Yoga, the yoga of direct perception, and the other is the discipline of Karma Yoga, the yoga of action.
So
The former,
we've kind of explained this in the last hour, but just to make it very clear, the Sankhya Yoga is the person that renunciates actions altogether because he doesn't believe he's doing actions. It is the gunas and the world that is doing the actions. He's just doing God's will.
So renunciation of actions, just to be very, very clear, it does not mean that the person is not doing anything, that his body is staying still. His body is still engaged in the world, because we've read that in chapter 3 also, right? As long as there's body, the action will be performed voluntarily or involuntarily. So renunciation of actions, do not read it to mean renunciation of any activity. His body is acting in activity, but there are no actions in the sense that there are no bondages being created out of it, because that person doesn't believe that he's doing anything. Whatever is happening automatically. Like I'm a machine and somebody is moving my buttons and I'm acting based on that. Yeah.
So the other aspect to understand renunciation of action is they're not doing duty actions based on deshkal paristhiti and their situation. They're not doing their duty based on their circumstance. They are doing duty based on God's will and God's will alone. That is their only thing that they're focusing their work on. Desireless performance of actions are karma yogi, where we know we have to perform actions. We are born with this dynamism trait that we have, the Rajoguni trait that we have within us, where we cannot sit idle the entire day. Like by 11 o'clock of idling, let's get up and let's clean the room and let's do this. And what is that? That is our innate nature to be in action. Let's go out for brunch. Let's do this. Let's do that. That is our, we can't be still, right? But so out here, desireless performance of action means we perform actions, but not based on our desires. We should do it based on our duty. That is when we really do the actions we are supposed to do the duty we are supposed to do, but not create further bondage.
So karma yogi gives up bhog tattva. Bhog tattva means he detaches himself from the fruit of the action, right? So karma yogi gives up bhog tattva, detaches himself from fruit of action, whereas a Sankhya yogi even gives up kartatva, doership. So he obviously gives up bhog tattva that the karma yogi has given up, but Sankhya yogi on top of that also gives up doership, kartatva, right? And the karma yogi has the sense of doership, but as an instrument of the Lord. So he knows, he's like, I am doing it, but I'm doing it as his instrument. So there is that difference. There is that ego concept, as in like I'm different, as a tag. I identify myself through that tag. But a Sankhya yogi doesn't even have that concept of a tag. There is no tag. It's like one big mass of everything mixed together. Let's read.
The former apparently affords Arjuna a way out of the fierce business of war. It sounds easy, but it would be naive to adopt this discipline, for it is extremely rare and difficult for anyone to visualize divinity everywhere. This is why Arjuna seeks a clarification. It is common experience that the difficulties and iniquities of worldly life would sometimes prompt some people to run away from home and forswear worldly responsibilities. Such people erroneously think that the life of a sannyasi would perhaps be free from these burdens. This is all due to ignorance. Accordingly, Arjuna's question is
Did they get dropped?
Yeah.
Okay. I think they got dropped. Kavita, would you mind finishing it, please, for them?
Accordingly, Arjuna's question is of immense use for everyone, as it would elicit a clarification from the Lord on this subject.
So I think we've talked a lot about this base, and as you guys do more manan and internalization and reflection on this, you may have questions, so feel free to reach out. We'll respond, but it's something that you will get greater clarity on when you start reading a little more about these sannyasis, a few of these books. If you need recommendations, we're happy to help. It will help you understand how they think differently from how we have to think as karma yogis. Yeah, Sanchita, would you mind reading the connection?
Connection. In reply, the Lord says,
Shri Bhagavanu Vacha.
Sri Bhagavanu Vacha Sannyasa Karma Yogascha
Nishreyaskara Vubho.
Nishreya Sakara Bhu.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get it. Tayostu Karma Sannyasat Karma Yoga Vishishyate. The Lord said, the renunciation of action and karma yoga, disciplined action, are both for ultimate good. But of the two, disciplined action is superior to renunciation of action.
I'll just give short meaning. Sannyasaha is basically Sankhya Yoga. Okay. Karma Yoga is Karma Yoga. Nishreyaskara Vubho means definitely lead to ultimate welfare. Definitely lead to your ultimate benefit. Tayostu, but between the two, karma sannyasat is compared to renunciation of action, compared to Sankhya Yoga. Karma yoga, Vishishyate is special or is better. Let's read.
Yeah. The Lord said, the renunciation of action and karma yoga, disciplined action, are both for ultimate good. But of the two, disciplined action is superior to renunciation of action. Disciplined action, easier to practice than renunciation. In this shloka, the Lord says that both the paths are for the ultimate good of a human being, but the two paths are mutually exclusive. A person cannot tread on both paths simultaneously. Of the two, karma yoga is easier to practice than renunciation of action. In other words, the path of renunciation of action, though a shortcut, is rugged and is extremely difficult to tread. The path of disciplined action takes a slightly longer time, but it is quite smooth and is easier to follow. Thus, even though both lead to the same goal, the path of disciplined action is stated to be superior.
I'm gonna ask a question here to anyone who can answer. Why is the path of renunciation of action, the Sankhya Yogi path, though shortcut, is rugged and extremely difficult to tread? Why is that? Anyone?
Because I think that you will be able, maybe who is following that path will succumb more to the desires, because it is a very, you have to be very disciplined. So, and as you move through that, there will be in your path lot of desires and such stuff that will come which can take you away. And so hence to be on that path may be more difficult.
Perfect. Beautiful answer. In that path, the mind will still be the mind. So if you don't have if you don't have your mind fully established in Bhagwanji and the discipline to keep that in that seat, the slippery slope is very, very slippery. You come back and from the bottom of the hill again. And that's you're I'm very well articulated, I would say. Anything else you'd like to add?
I think we've already talked about it. It's just something that I've written down here that Kumar would have definitely told us when we did this shlokas. I want to repeat it because I think it's quite beautiful. He told us, कर्म योगी सेवा के लिए सबको अपना मानता है, पर अपने लिए किसी को अपना नहीं मानता. So what are you renouncing and how are you being in the world? So he is the ultimate server. He's the ultimate seva. Basically, a karma yogi, for the purpose of doing seva, the whole world is his own. He's going to do everybody's seva. But he's not attached to anybody. Apne liye, for his own self, he does not consider anybody to be his own. Right? So that attachment is what we need to get rid of. We have to do our duty and we have to do seva for everyone. My duty is to do seva for my immediate family, but that does not mean that I will not treat every other family just the way I would treat my own family. So if someone else comes in my contact, I will treat them with the same love, respect, and give them the same treatment as I would give to my family members. That's the true karma yogi. But apne liye apna kisi ko nahi manta, as in I have no expectations of others to give anything back to me. Right? That I do not expect, this is my husband, so he must do these things for me. This is my child, so he must listen to me. He must do as I am telling him to be. There are no such expectations. So Karma Yogi is a perfect sevak, is a perfect server.
Connection. The Lord now explains why it is superior.
Smita, will you read with us?
Did you call
Actually,
up
I'm out, so
Yes, Smita.
no, I'm out, so I don't have access to book, but I am still hearing.
No worries, no
So
worries.
Nena.
Yeah.
She did the same.
Yeah. So Nena, you want to read with us?
Sure. The Lord now explains why it is superior.
Yeya sa nitya sannyasi.
Yeya sa nitya sannyasi.
Yo dveshti na kankshati.
Yo na dveshti na kankshati.
Nirdvando hi mahabaho.
Nirdvandho hi mahabaho.
Sukham bandhat pramuchyate.
Sukham bandhat pramuchyate.
Yeya is what is eligible to be known, what is worth being known. Samajhne yogya. Nitya sannyasi is eternal sannyasi, eternal renouncer. Yo, who, na, does not. Dveshti does not have dislikes, right? Na kankshati has no expectations or likes. Nirdvando, free from duality. He Mahabaho is reference to Arjun. Sukham is whatever comes easily, right? Happiness. So in this case, with great ease. Bandhat pramuchyate, bandhan se mukt ho jata hai, gains emancipation, gains freedom from bondage.
A person who is neither actuated by any prejudice nor by any liking in whatever he does is fit to be known as a renouncer, sannyasi, For one whose mind is not affected by the duality of favorable and unfavorable, gains emancipation with great ease, O Mahabahu. Karma Yogi fit to be called a sannyasi. In this shloka, the Lord throws clear light on what a Karma Yogi is. While discharging all the duties of life, a Karma Yogi entertains neither prejudice against nor liking for any person, occurrence, or circumstances. While being completely free of any prejudice, he is not actuated by considerations of any personal liking either. Such a Karma Yogi, according to the Lord, deserves the exalted place of a sannyasi, even though he may be without saffron clothes like an ordained monk. The mind of such a man is not involved in consideration of what is favorable or what is not. The reason is that he is dependent only on the Lord's will and not on anything of the world. As such, he gains freedom from the bondage of the world with great ease.
So this shloka is, it always reminds me of our parivar, right? It started with Babaji and Babuji, and Babaji was the realized saint. This is way back in the 40s. Their ashram is still there in Gorakhpur. So if you ever go to India and you would like to visit Gorakhpur, I think that can be arranged. So so they both met. Babaji was a Sankhya Yoga and Babuji was a Grahast, so a householder. He had a family and he had his own duty. But Babuji is considered a sannyasi because while he had to do duty and do karma yogi, his entire world and action was to build this out. And he attracted the energy of Mr. Dr. D.M. Sinha, who was an accountant by profession. And he came into their light and he was so attracted by them that he gave up his profession, spent time with them, used his skills to not only understand the Gita, but as an educated man, start writing. First in Hindi, then in English, right? So these are all sannyasis. So we can find this Sanskrit conversation a little more relatable because sannyasis have come in and have made it, done their duty and made it more relatable for us as well, right? So, and that's what a karma yogi has to work on. So the other example that I always, not always, but that I wrote down to share with this shlok is a story about a wood and a woodcutter, right? A piece of wood goes to a woodcutter and says, Mr. Woodcutter, I have seen what amazing, beautiful things you do with wood. I have seen you make beautiful tables and ornate pieces, and I'm just a log of wood. I would like you to chisel me into something beautiful, right? So the woodcutter says, okay. So what does the woodcutter start doing? He starts cutting it. And the piece of wood is like, "Arey bhai, no, that hurts. Why are you cutting me? This is so painful. I don't want to go through this." And then the woodcutter says, no, this is part of the process. I cannot make you beautiful. I cannot realize your true potential till I cut you. So he continues cutting. Then he's like, I'm done for the day. I'll come back tomorrow. The piece of wood comes back. And eventually it becomes something absolutely beautiful, which gets placed at an altar. Same thing with us as karma yogis. We have to do our action. We can't not do our action. But every time we do our action, we engage with the world, we engage with things we don't like, we do sacrifice, where all we're doing is cutting off that excess wood to realize our true self. And that's how karma yogi operates. They use the world to cleanse themselves constantly, to keep their ego in check, to keep their likes and dislikes in check, to operate from principle and duty rather than likes and dislikes and prejudice.
So the way to remember Karma Yogi is a 2-in-1 deal. right? You can do everything that you're supposed to do as a karma yogi and yet be a sannyasi, right? So you live in the world and yet be a sannyasi. It's a 2-in-1 deal. This person has to be free of likes and dislikes, right? And especially, dvesh towards people, things, or whatever. So one of the tricks that Kumar had once told us is that to overcome dvesh towards a person or a situation or a thing, whenever you feel that dvesh, to overcome it, you should do seva. You should do seva for that situation, that person, that place, whatever that you are feeling dvesh towards, do seva, whether it is in thought or in action. Sometimes all you have to do is, if you're feeling kind of like dvesh towards a person, send good thoughts for them, do a prayer for them. Or go out of your way to help them even more. That is the best way to overcome your dvesh in a practical way. So what that also means is that burai ka tyag karna, to give up the negatives inside of us, is sometimes more important than imbibing the good things. Because like any vessel, for us to put more water in that vessel, we first have to make it empty. We first have to take something out of it, right? So take out the burai and then replace it with achai. But you cannot just keep filling up new things without creating a space for that thing to come in first. So giving up dvesh will then help us develop the right types it will help us get rid of other issues as well. Because we are constantly operating with that likes and dislikes. I don't want to do this, I like to do that. So there was this whole cheat sheet that he gave us for giving up the dvesh. I thought we must share with the class here. And another cheat sheet was Nishkam. We keep saying that Nishkam Karma Yoga, right? How do you do Nishkam? Nishkam Karma Yoga is easy when you think of Parhit or Lokhit. When you're dealing with somebody, when you're doing some work with somebody, think of how you can benefit the other person before you can think of how this thing will benefit me. If you're doing a transaction, how can I leave more on the table? If you're doing a negotiation, can I leave something more on the table for the other person that will help him benefit more? Think of other person's benefit in an action before you think of your own benefit. That's a great cheat sheet to start on a path of Nishkam Karma Yoga. So you're not attached to your own benefit or your end outcome, and you're thinking of other people as well. Think of others first. We should stop here. Okay. We'll have a birthday celebration for Abhinav. But we'll first do the closing shlokas.
ॐ सर्वेषां स्वस्तिर्भवतु सर्वेषां शान्तिर्भवतु सर्वेषां पूर्णं भवतु सर्वेषां मङ्गलं भवतु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतङ्गमय ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः ॐ पूर्णमद पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः
Very, very beautiful.